use that line. It happens, Mr. Roark.
Okay, Riley, thank you.
That does not surprise me.
All right, anyway.
Jake has.
Your large intestine is basically the place where all of the undigestible material goes before it will be evacuated from the body. Okay. Now, there will be some absorption, mostly of water, through the walls of the large intestine. Because when the stuff comes out of your small intestine, it's still kind of a soupy mix. You would still consider it to be chyme. Most of the nutrients have been pulled out of it, but it's still a watery mix of stuff. And in most cases, we know that's not how it comes out. So there's a lot of water reabsorption that happens there. Unless there's something wrong with you, like a sickness or something like that. In which case, a lot of water reabsorption does not happen, and you get a different kind of stuff that comes out. Yes. Okay, so reabsorption of water is important, but they have compaction of the material into what we would call feces. And the main point of that is just so that it can be discarded at one discrete time. If you've ever been sick, you know that having diarrhea, one of the problems of it is it kind of comes out whenever it feels like. Whereas in a normal functioning body, you can have maybe once or twice a day you're able to get rid of that stuff. Now there are some vitamins that will get absorbed through the walls of the colon, through the large intestine. The specific part of is the colon, as we'll see. But again, most of the nutrients have been absorbed before that. So we've split the large intestine up into three parts. But the first part and the last part are fairly small. The majority of it is the middle. So the first part is called the cecum. And that's the small part of the large intestine that comes right after the ileocecal valve that occurs between the small intestine and the large intestine. So this cecal part comes from the name of the cecum. And it's a fairly small area of the large intestine. On page 508 in your book, you can see kind of the structure of the large intestine. It actually, your small intestine ends up pretty close to where the material will eventually come out, but the large intestine has to kind of store it and compact it, so it actually goes up and then over and then back down. And it makes kind of almost a circuit that frames the small intestines. Okay, hanging off the side of the cecum is the appendix. Terraform appendix, specifically. It looks like kind of a little worm hanging off the side. We mostly know about the appendix when it gets infected and swells and becomes inflamed, and it can actually burst and cause bleeding that can kill you, and it can be quite painful, so we get it removed. It was thought before that the appendix had no function to it, but we're starting to think that it might be a place where the good bacteria, the bacteria that you need to help break down things in your large intestine, can hang out during a sickness, so they don't all get destroyed and evacuated. What's that? Yes. Okay, so your appendix might be kind of a hidey hole for that good bacteria, so they can repopulate your gut if there's some sort of sickness that comes through and wipes them all out. So throughout your entire digestional tract, you've got lots of bacteria. In fact, there are more bacteria cells than you have cells in your entire body, by number anyway, and they're important in your digestion. So from the cecum, the major main section of the large intestine is the colon. And we kind of break it up into three parts based on the direction it's running. So you've got the ascending, the transverse. Transverse means to go across, and then the descending part of the colon. Okay, throughout the colon you've got smooth muscle. That is important in the peristalsis. You're not really going to have segmentation here. We don't want to be breaking things up, but we want to move it along throughout the length. So that smooth muscle is going to be able to move things along. And then at the end of the descending colon, you have the sigmoid colon that looks kind of like an S shape. And the sigmoid colon is where material is going to kind of build up before defecation happens, before it goes into the rectum. Okay, so I mean, as far as the structure goes, it's pretty simple. Absorption of water, compaction of the material, a little bit of vitamins. Okay, now the last part of the large intestine is the rectum. It's a muscular structure. And that's going to lead to the anus, which is the opening to the outside of the body. Okay, and right at the anus, you're going to find two different muscles. There's the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. And those are going to be what control your ability to defecate. In older people, the control of that can be lost, voluntary control, which is why older people sometimes have trouble with their bowel movements. Now, the way these muscles work, the external one is under voluntary control, so your brain is able to control that. The internal one is involuntary control. Once enough material builds up, the internal sphincter muscle will open up and let material from the colon into the rectum, which means it's time to get rid of it. But kind of a cool setup there is that when that one opens up, the other one, the voluntary one, is involuntarily clamped shut. So as soon as the one opens up and lets things into the rectum, the other one involuntarily clamps shut, so it can't come out until your brain says it's time. That means that the actual final stage of getting rid of that waste material is completely voluntary under most circumstances. Okay, as the material moves into the rectum, stretch receptors there are going to send signals to your brain, giving you the urge to defecate.
You said that to a chicken. Oh, she came back with, I wish I could be toilet paper, or I wish I was toilet paper so I could touch your butt all day.
So, I mean, is the main goal at track meets just to walk around saying stupid lines to each other?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yep. And some minor destruction along the way.
Oh, okay.
And still has nothing on the
Let's see.
That was funny. I mean, we didn't, no, that didn't happen. What?
All right, let's move on here. So, around the anus there are blood vessels there that supply the muscles. Obviously the muscles are important, so they have to have that oxygen. And if you strain that tissue too much, it can actually break the blood vessels, and it can become very tender and sore, and that's what we call hemorrhoids. So hemorrhoids can be caused by a few number of things, but one is constipation. Having large bowel movements can actually cause hemorrhoids through the breaking and distending of those blood vessels.
Bobby's turned into a rebel.
Okay. Now, in the large intestine, as certain things, as the water is reabsorbed and certain things are compacted, you can have a buildup of certain chemicals and hydrogen sulfides, gases that can form, and those are what are released that make defecation and feces smell the way they do. That rotten egg smell comes from both ammonia and hydrogen sulfide that are formed in the whole process of digestion. Although the amount of those different compounds that are formed is going to depend on, largely on diet. Okay, and because the colon and the large intestine is so good at absorption of water and liquids, sometimes certain medicines will actually be given rectally. Suppositories are put in that way because they are absorbed and the uptake is much quicker than through the gut. We've talked about before how the stomach really that mucus layer prevents a lot of absorption of certain things. And so a lot of times medicines that you take orally are not going to do anything for you until they move into the small intestine, and that can take a while. And so suppositories, those kind of medicines, are given rectally so that the absorption happens and they get into your system much more quickly. You also hear of college people taking advantage of this by inserting certain things to get alcohol into the rectum and into the colon, because the alcohol will be absorbed much more quickly there. My advice is don't do that. Don't try that.
I'd rather
That's just weird. Yeah. It's just weird. You know?
And the guy got the explosive. That's he's suing her because she allowed it. I wrote